What is the world record for the most amount of people flown on a DC-3 at one time? Have you ever thought of that? Well, I have. So think of a number, write it down, maybe even write it in the comments because we'll get back to it. Let's jump aboard this DC-3 and go on a journey. The DC-3 aircraft design actually started off as an enlarged version of the DC-2 to have 14 beds in here. That's right. The airplane used to fly at night and was called the Douglas Sleeper Transport, or DST for short. They took that version and kind of made the DC-3 that we know today, and it was originally designed to haul 21 people and 3 crew, which is what, 24 people? Now, here in Canada, this aircraft right here, LFR, is legally allowed to hold 27 passengers, 1 flight attendant, and 2 crew. So that's 30 people. But other places in the world are a little bit different. Each country in the world has their own aviation departments and aeronautical rules. Loads up to 40 people were common in the Philippines, and believe it or not, on flights from Australia to New Guinea, Qantas rigged the DC-3 with slings and carried up to 50 people. Our friends in Australia have set the DC-3 passenger airline record at 50 people, plus 3 crew, 53 people, but I'm guessing you probably guessed a higher number than that. To get on our world record journey, we actually have to start in a very unlikely place. Yes, have you ever heard of the Doolittle Raid? Well, that's where our story starts. April 18th, 1942, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle himself was rescued by a Goonie bird and set a world record for passengers flown in a DC-3. If you're not familiar with Jimmy Doolittle and his famous raid over Tokyo, we'll have to do a quick history lesson. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States military was looking for retaliation. They came up with a top-secret bombing mission. The plan was simple but crazy at the same time. The US military had no air bases or bombers that could reach the Japanese mainland for an attack and return home safely. So what did they do? They stripped out 16 B-25B Mitchell medium bombers and put them on an aircraft carrier and took them as close as they could to Japan. They took off from that carrier knowing that they would most likely not have enough fuel to reach a friendly airbase.
It's airborne. The first Army bomber ever to be launched from a carrier is safely in the air.
So it was basically a one-way trip. The mission objectives of bombing their targets was mostly a success. Even though the damage inflicted to the Japanese was very minimal, the huge morale boost it gave the Allied troops was really what made the largest impact. Out of 80 crewmen that took off that day, 69 airmen escaped capture or death. 3 were killed in action, 8 were captured and became POWs, of which 3 of them were executed, 1 died in captivity, and 4 were rescued in 1945. Jimmy Doolittle was one of the fortunate 69 airmen that was lucky enough to evade capture. After being smuggled into China, he jumped aboard a CNAC DC-3 en route to safety in India. On board that flight was 21 fully equipped soldiers, 15 women, 22 children, 7 civilians, the pilot, co-pilot, and Doolittle himself. As they landed in India, an additional 8 stowaways staggered out of the aft cargo department, bringing the total passengers flying on that single DC-3 to 76. Doolittle remarked to the pilot, if he had known he was crazy enough to take off with so many people, he would have walked home. In later years, Doolittle also recalled, I wasn't worried about the number of people on board. I was worried about running out of gas. I find that the most coolest thing about this whole thing is that Jimmy Doolittle, one of the biggest American heroes of World War II, was on that famous flight. Did you notice the CNAC aircraft? If you've been following our histories on the DC-3s, that is a little Easter egg for you. But this video isn't over, so there must be more. The next flight in question was another rescue mission. In 1949, after an earthquake ravaged Bolivia, it is reported that 93 people, most of which were children, were flown out on a single DC-3. But I'm kind of hesitant to mention this one as I couldn't find really any sources. It is mentioned verbatim in a few websites, but it all seems to be coming from one single book that came out in 1991 called The Douglas DC-3 by Henry Holden. If you know any more about this incident, please let me know. 95 is already 4 times more than this aircraft was originally designed to carry. Well, we're not over yet, folks. We now have to open up the pages of the New York Times.
Saigon, South Vietnam, March 23rd. An aviation record was established here today when an aging DC-3 evacuated 98 refugee orphans, accompanied by 5 attendants from the central highlands town of Doolittle, by far the greatest number of passengers ever carried by this type of plane. With communist pressure mounting rapidly around Doolittle, the orphans were among the last to be evacuated. The DC-3, owned and operated by Continental Air Services, is normally chartered to an oil prospecting company, but was pressed into emergency evacuation work in cooperation with Air Vietnam. The children were loaded aboard by weight rather than a number. The orphans, ranging from less than 1 year to 14 years of age, arrived silent and wide-eyed in Saigon, where they were loaded aboard buses and taken to a new sanctuary. Commercial DC-3 airliners normally have 28 seats. On this flight, however, besides the 103 passengers, the plane carried a crew of 3 and a Vietnamese steward. The DC-3 transport was designed in 1935. Everything flyable in Vietnam is being used to ferry refugees from many different places.
107 people. How close were you on your guess? Let me know. I think that record is pretty much safe for now, as for legal reasons, I don't think you can go that high. A lot of those were kids, but again, think of the legal ramifications for putting that many people on an aircraft. Just mind-boggling. So, if you've been enjoying these DC-3 video series, I'm going to have a big finale coming up. Super excited about it, so make sure to subscribe. Keep in touch, and we're going to be seeing you very, very soon. Thanks for joining us. Bye.